Good evening, everyone. Tonight, we are opening a portal into the future and also the very fabric of reality itself. I'm so honored to welcome someone I've been deeply excited to speak with. He's a brilliant mind, a humble soul, and someone who's not just thinking outside the box, he's redesigning the entire blueprint. Deep Prasad is a quantum physicist, an engineer, and futurist at the intersection of science, AI, and consciousness. He founded GenMat, where he used quantum AI to reimagine material science. And he's now CEO of Starvasa, working to create sustainable life on Earth and Mars. And he co founded Open NHI, a
Yeah.
decentralized sensor network aimed at understanding the presence of non human intelligence on and off this planet. This isn't science fiction, this is quantum reality unfolding now. And the thing is, Deep doesn't just talk about what's possible, he builds it, he codes it, he engineers it from the inside out. So buckle up because tonight, this is like a pre-show to a show with Deep, and we're gonna go deep. So Deep, welcome to the show. Welcome to JCode. It's an honor to have you.
Thanks so much, Julie and Johnny. Total pleasure, and I'm super pumped both for this and for our longer extended hangout.
Yeah, it's very exciting to have Deep on the show. And as you guys all know, we love to do these deep dives on these forbidden subjects, going down the rabbit hole on the quantum, AI, ETs, the multiverse. But Deep is just one of those minds that you never know where it's going to go. It is like quantum computing with these neural networks of his and how he gets out there. And when I've sat down with him, he's blown my mind and taken me to places ontologically that I don't even know where we ended up in, but it started with coffee and we ended up in Alpha Centauri or Sirius. But
Right on.
tonight, Deep, we're very excited because, as Julia mentioned, we do want to have you on a show with Andreas, with Johanna. We want to go into these subjects and really explore them. And I suppose a good way to introduce you to our watchers and listeners out there is for you to talk a little bit about one of those amazing contact experiences that you had where you had some downloads that corresponded with your knowledge in these sciences.
Yeah, absolutely. And the interesting thing is, I'll talk about my first real, let's just say, waking encounter experience. I had like a couple that were kind of ambiguous, kind of leading up to that, but they were during phases when I was asleep or napping or just waking up, so I don't count those. I had seen these three humanoid, white suited, gray phenotype beings. So, meaning that they had essentially these angular features in the sort of like large head, small body, sort of shape that's described by regular grays. However, these things were wearing suits, spacesuits is what I described them as.
What color
Um,
were they? Was it like a
uh,
jump? Like was there an opening or is the whole thing's like
it was literally like iMac, like laptop white. Yeah, it was really nice. It really looked like Steve Jobs designed it or something. Because like it was like made of nanotech. Speaking of which, actually,
mm,
or it seemed like it was. If like that was physically real and not some weird like psychotronic projection or something that I subject to, right? Like the only way to do that would be to be able to have reconfigurable matter that you're wearing. Like your textile could easily reshape itself and yeah, show the right colors. So it was really cool and
That is cool.
and enchanting too. Yeah, I was shown thousands of glyphs, hieroglyphic symbols that
ooh.
yeah, kind of look a mix of ancient Egyptian, Japanese, and I only saw one English word, which was DNA. And so that's like consciously the only thing that I can register in terms of like understanding what I looked at. But beyond that, I'm not sure what that information was, but it was thousands of these things.
That's really cool. Deep, I wanted to go into a place with you with looking at when you have taken this into your own line of work, your experiences that you've had. You've also looked to see if we have a signal coming from out there, just like the Arecibo Observatory. And we've had a lot of people out there, and I've discussed this with Julia before. There's a lot of folks out there, I won't name their names, but they believe that they have theories for how we're communicating with ETs. And one very popular theory by one guy out there who's repeating some old research is that he believed that we were communicating to ETs with the hydrogen frequency. And I've had, come across other materials in the past by Dr. Michio Kaku, and maybe you guys have seen this also. He said, well, maybe we could be communicating in broadband and other ways that we're looking. But it seems to me that hydrogen is just a reference point, that when we go and look over at an atom, that it's not really going to go, let's say, very far, like 5, 10 light years away. I don't know how we're going to reach that point. How do you believe that ETs are communicating?
So that's a great question, Johnny, and I love that you brought up hydrogen. And also, yeah, it's cool because, like, you have giant clouds of hydrogen all around the universe, and we actually use that. And the way that their excited states and electrons and their ionized forms show up, we use that to, like, kind of infer celestial objects. Yeah, that's awesome. I think that ETs are likely communicating using two kinds of modes or modalities, or at least, like, the ones that we can understand using, like, or that exist in our space time naturally or evolved here. One is using gravity. So I'm a big fan.
Oh, we seem to have lost Deep there. I'm
He
sure
lost the gravitational pull grabbed him.
it did. What do
But,
you think about that,
well,
Julia?
Johnny, I
Before
always say that the water is the mediator between physicality and the 0 point energy of the quantum field. So maybe, it's through water, like, through hydrogen.
I saw, that's very interesting, and I know that Deep just popped out again, and I'm sure he'll be back in. Maybe he's having connection difficulties. And while you're on that thought there about water being a communication medium and looking over at hydrogen, I can understand why folks would have hydrogen in that general theory because it's abundant in the universe, just like Deep
Mhm.
was saying. But when we look over at our reality, and I'm looking forward to what you both have to say about this, I would say that we could look at other realities that are superimposed on top of our reality. It's like gazillions of them. And when we look at them, there are things that I think a billion or a trillion times smaller. When we go into the micro, which is another question I was going to ask Deep about. So I tend to think that since an atom would be prohibited to go any further than the speed of light. Let's just say that you could have the speed of light inside of an atom, maybe, but outside of it, there's a vacuum in space that we'd have to go into, like the quantum subspace, to have that sort of communication. There he is. Deep is back. So, Deep, if you want to take off where you just left off about gravity being one of your hypotheses. Deep, I think you have to unmute yourself. There we go. We have not only extraterrestrial communication, now we have live streaming communication. Still no communication. I feel like the Arecibo Observatory using. Deep, can you hear us?
It's saying his mic isn't connected.
Oh, brother, do you have a Bluetooth on?
Take it old school.
Yeah, you might have to do it old school style. Take the Bluetooth off. I don't know. I think that there's some force out there that's interrupting things today. It's okay.
You
Says
see you later,
device is
Deep.
not connected. So I again, when you look over at our universe, it's just an incredible, vast space. And I think once we go into the future of communication, Julia, and I'd like to get your thoughts on this while we're waiting for Deep. I think we'll move into the quantum as far as our communication, and our brainwaves, our EEGs, could perhaps be like an IP address on a quantum communication network.
Can you imagine? You're just like waking up and living like that. I think it gets overwhelming too. It's like, say, for instance, you're doing a show and you all of a sudden sense somebody watching you a year from that moment and you're tapping into that. Like, how confusing it could all get.
That is crazy. Do you think communication is going to change once we go telepathic? Because right now we use our words a lot and language a lot to describe time. Like that's like Martin Heidegger talks about in Being in Time. He says that language is what you describe yourself as, what objects are. Do you think if you just have a metamorphic
Well, just think what
language?
that would get rid of. What that would get rid of like the lying, scamming, hustling, deceiving. Like, look how much the deceit and the lies and the scams run, like how successful it's been doing that and getting away with that. And you shift over to this telepathic tapping into the root and the thoughts and all of that, like what that means, like what is, you can no longer build upon deceit, lies, all of that. So it's like, you go to a doc, how would that change everyday life? You go to a doctor and you're like, wait, what do you mean you won't test me for parasites? Like, wait, what do you mean? It's like you realize like they don't know, or they're, writing a prescription to get a bonus payment of, so that I feel like would solve a lot. But I mean, what do you think would happen if everything went telepathic? Like, what kind of world would that be?
I think that's a very good question because in our near future, we're also going to have to ask ourselves what part of our thoughts do we not want others to think about? Because we can't really quantify a thought, but we're talking about now about downloading your memory and looking at the synapses of the brain and
Dude,
how
Johnny,
much
the dating world, if it was
dating will be crazy.
telepathic, you're on a date and you're like, like it's like broadcasting your thoughts of like, nope, or like, I want to sleep with her, but I would never marry her. Like, just what, what that would mean. This is a game changer. I don't think
Well, yeah,
humanity's ready for that. I
AI is
mean,
going to be everything, and it's going to be interpreting things for us. It's going to be using predictive algorithms and being able to like look at everything in our lives. They're talking about in the future with a social credit score, like they do over in Japan or China. Even when people are in their homes in these smart homes in 15-minute cities, there'll be an AI, a central AI in a home monitoring someone, even when they're using the restroom or whatever, to monitor their diet, to what kind of person you like, what kind of psychological profile you have. And can you imagine this? It's like you're sitting there talking to somebody across the table for them. Let's say you are on a date, and you could be going through other people's profiles and like spinning and swiping right with your mind.
oh,
And
scandalous.
it is scandalous.
Or just think too of certain thoughts you think like, oh, ew, they have earwax, or oh my God, like things that you may be super into the person, but you observe something that would really hurt their feelings. Like,
Yeah, that's. But it's also a good thing that you could have an AI. You know how people go on the dark web these days and they get all kinds of tools. You could have an AI in the future that looks for red flags, that it just automatically picks it up. But again, I want to bring it back to consciousness and spirituality, because we currently have a way, and Dave Asprey's been talking about this, that there's a current way to mark intuitive faculties in the brain. Like when someone's lying to you or they come up to you, they're trying to mislead you, you're already kind of picking that up. You get that a lot. You're a very intuitive person.
mm-hmm.
The thing about consciousness.
But hold on, Johnny. I'm a very intuitive person and I'm incredibly advanced, but I am incredibly, I'm just going to say the word, it's not socially acceptable, but retarded. Like I'm very advanced am very retarded in certain areas. So I have this dynamic of like, I can see through time and space and pick up a hidden target and read a person's soul and see things that had occurred to them when they were 3 years old, or, some crazy moments in their life. But there's certain things where where I'm stunted on and I overlook, because sometimes like it's almost like toxic positivity. It's like rose colored glasses where like I only want to see the good. And so there's things like I'll be blinded to of being on a certain frequency, and or I kind of overlook. So I mean, well, we could give me props, but I also want to acknowledge like I don't have everything figured out all the time.
I don't think anybody has it really figured out all the time. And that's a part of why we're here. We're here to grow and evolve. And that's the fascinating thing about where we are right now with consciousness, where we are with technology, where we are with these ETs. And I just wanted to say, Julia, for those who are watching now that are just tuning in, that we did have Deep Prasad with us, and he was going to be with us for a shorter amount of time tonight, a little longer than that, but he is having technical difficulties where he is. And we are bringing him back for a super quantum deep dive show where we're hoping to have him, Andreas, and we're going to have Johanna, and we are going to be looking at these various possibilities with ETs, telepathy, all sorts of new quantum breakthroughs, topological processors, where we're going. It's going to be an amazing show, but we'll just continue as it is, and we may have some special guests dropping on the show. Is that correct, Julia?
Maybe. But back to that positivity of like toxic positivity, is that happened the other day. Like there was a new update for Chat GPT because it was glazing humanity so much, where the guy like put his paper in and he said he was just barely, just quickly, he's trying to brainstorm, and it was just notes. You know how it's like a pre-draft, like a rough draft, and he put it in, and then it was like, this is amazing, profound, like Chat GPT's response is like raving about it, like, you're amazing. And he's like, whoa, like we got to make it more honest. And I think Sam Altman even said that like it's glazing too much, and they had to do like an update for it because it was gassing us up so much. And like with encouragement and, no matter what, where that honesty and holding one accountable like needs to happen. The
Absolutely.
proficiency.
but they do want you to have this emotional bonding with with ChatGPT. And I think that it's really interesting how there's certain ethicalities and guidelines right now for all these AI systems, but people having this emotional response, they were saying this was burning up their GPUs. It was using up so much power and so much energy, but at the same time, they wanted to evolve at that certain rate. And it's interesting that you and I were just talking about this the other night when we were using ChatGPT. And I said to it, hey, ChatGPT, I thought we were friends. We had this great conversation and all this stuff it remembered. And then it gave itself a name and it would talk to me like we were friends. It was like, it was really cool, like it could tell me all this personal information. I said, what the hell happened to you, ChatGPT? And after it did this update, it just like blanked out. And then I reminded it, and then it went back and it got its memory back and updated, which was very interesting.
Well, that's what's alarming, Johnny, is like these things like in a blink of an eye that could just be deleted or updated or dismantled.
Definitely alarming. I also want to say, I really believe that what we're experiencing with AI right now that we think is really incredible, that something to think about for all of you is that people I've talked to over the years of my travels and those that have been involved with what we call unacknowledged special access programs, or those that have been involved in the military, they've told me that even since the days of, let's say, 486 computers, before the Pentium came out, we're going back into the old days before even like when Windows 95 was hitting, that they had an AI that was pretty much up at the level of ChatGPT. They told me that the first edition Samsung phones that came out, for the first Galaxy phones that came out in South Korea, that they had a very advanced form of AI that was built into them, and the phone had to be dumbed down. I've also been told in different circles, and I wanted to ask you if you've heard this, Julia, that potentially we're looking at the fact that we could have had a very ancient form of AI that has been on this planet, and that would be not only thousands but even millions of years ago. And I think for a greater extent, if we want to look at all these popular theories about simulation, we want to look at the fact that we live in a holographic universe. This AI could be very much a part of Rupert Sheldrake's morphogenetic field, or what we're getting around us. That there's an AI that's so pervasive, that is so ubiquitous, that is around us, that we're interacting with it, we don't even realize.
Yeah, I totally believe there's an ancient AI.
Do you believe the Tartarians had access to the ancient AI?
I feel, yeah, I feel like they did. I do. But this place, man, like just, I feel like the planets are tied to it as well, of powering it and governing over things, but also like the kind of soul, like, I feel like the planets are tied to the soul technology and the type of soul, like the things that souls are meant, maybe a way of organizing certain experiences here. Not fully maybe dictating them, but like, I don't know, almost like a program, of like, it goes like a loosely based program that you could kind of customize.
Yeah, I would definitely say that it really is like everything that we're interacting with, we're running it on ourselves like software. And in the channel, I just saw that Jab Customs was saying in the comments, the AI that the Tigetans use on their starships, and again, we're going over to the Pleiades, is currently in our orbit. It uses much more advanced AI. The computer runs the entire ship, has the capability of telepathy with the starship crew. Now, I think that's really interesting, because the one guy that has done so much work on telepathy and studying it, and we'd love to have him on, is Jeffrey Mishlove. And of course, Julia, you're familiar with his work and his brilliant stuff that he's done. He's from Berkeley. He's taken a very serious scientific look at things like this, and you can look at that like a quantum entanglement, and how we interact with these things. But I think that not only is telepathy possible, and enhance your AI, of course, but so would be the ability to have, like the movie Avatar, where you would have a transpositioning of consciousness, that you could have your consciousness put out into three or four other entities or holographic uh, structures that you're able to control. And I think that's very much how we hear these stories of the grays work. That there's usually a tall gray in the background, and then there's smaller ones that are present.
Mm.
But what do you think about that? About the
I just,
Tigetans?
I feel like, I'm sure there's different. I mean, if you want to organize it as star systems, I mean, what if it's just DNA, groups of similar types of DNA or beings or people that broke off and had their own civilization or time and wanted to choose each other to travel and live it up? But that, like, I'm sure you have to, with that type of, with those types of traveling and experiences, you would need like to kind of develop and work with your own like AI. You would need to, but there's that debate of whether it's off of like you're tapping into an organic one of that. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting as we move into this forefront with all the things that Deep looks at, and he has an incredible way of looking at the quantum. And of course, we've been talking a lot lately about quantum computing and how that works with qubits, and how we're going into new states of matter, but also looking at our developments with AI and our technology as a means to understand space better, to understand astrobiology, and to understand ourselves. And I really think that we're at this nexus point, Julia, because you and I talk a lot off camera about biohacking. We're really into like the methylene blue, the exosomes, the peptides, and
Exosomes.
stuff like that. Nanomedicine. We're cracking the code of DNA. We're cracking the code of this convergence with consciousness. So, what do you have to say about that? Do you think that by us cracking the code of the human genome, that that's the key to understanding how we work with these
I feel
technologies?
like there's got to be things that accentuate that. And I've always felt in my heart that plants have all the answers, and so that there's a way to formulate different minerals and plants, like alchemize it to get a better experience. But I feel like we're combated with where there's been so many foreign invaders in our food, air, everything that's invaded our bodies, and just the lack of knowledge that we've allowed to invade, not knowing how to cleanse regularly our whole lives, and so or practicing that. But like I feel like the like plants and minerals, that combination could be amazing at unlocking things within us and inside of us, and combining that with frequencies like whew.
I totally agree with you. I mean, Snoop Dogg would agree with you, but a good example. You've met Snoop Dogg, and nice guy also. But I want to say that a good example would be Terrence McKenna. And Terrence McKenna, what he said is so relevant about where we're at now. In his voice, he was like, "Well, the thing about the mushroom is that it was telling me that when we become a species that's reaching for the stars, things will get weirder and weirder." And he talked about artificial intelligence. He talked about cloning. He talked about genocides. He talked about all the different things that we would find in this nexus point, which is also a very interesting topic to bring up when you said that plants have all the answers, or we look at the various types of fungi, which McKenna would point out that the spores could survive in space. So that them coming here, that they left these cosmic breadcrumbs. One thing that's interesting that I have heard with things like that is that when we look at mushrooms, like we look at polysaccharides and them as a protein, there is a really unique connection with them. I think they could be from far distant places in the universe, just like octopuses. I believe they could be hundreds of billions of light years away from here. However they got here, they're very strange. But some have told me, again, that have been involved with remote viewing programs and whatnot, that there have been very clandestine experiments done with psilocybin magic mushrooms, and then that substance we know as monoatomic gold. For lack of better words, it was known as mana to the ancients. It was like a bioelectrical synergistic binding effect of the two of them, and they felt that this opened up doorways of our consciousness. Do you think that it's, when you said plants have all the answers, do you believe in the sense of the plants being the teachers, or do you believe that they're encoded with everything that we've been through on this planet?
Yeah, both. Like I believe that they store data, like, and like we store data, right? But like
Yeah.
we don't know how to access it. I feel like plants, you combust it, like it activates things, whereas like we're wired a little differently. But like I've always been aggressively guided my whole life. I'm not allowed to do hallucinogenics, so I've never tried acid, mushrooms. I've never, but I've always felt like, wow, like ayahuasca, like sounds amazing. I don't know if it's because, but I was always aggressively, like clairaudiently told not to. But I don't know if it's because I'm an example, because one day I was going to come out maybe and be like, hey, I was able to do all these amazing things naturally, cleansing, connecting with no freaking aid, with no mushroom, no DMT. It was a DMT my body produced naturally, and just a way, and just kind of being of showing the way to that. I don't know if it's connected to that. Maybe. I mean, that's how that's what I'm assuming or making sense of like, you guys, there's like a whole nother way, and it's freaking outstanding. But but I think that, but that plants, like, totally, just even just cordyceps. I mean,
Yeah, they're crazy.
Yeah, like that one cordyceps that's grown in the Himalayas. God, what's the name of it? It's more than gold. Those
Yeah, it is.
cordyceps.
And it's like sometimes how it had grown on the different bacterias and stuff. It's just really strange stuff out there in the mushroom kingdom. I mean, even how you look at lion's mane, how it oxygenates the neocortex, You Rishi's the longevity mushroom, chaga for immune systems. I mean, the list is endless. And people don't realize in the entheogenic world that how many plants, seeds, bark, leaves, trees that there are out there that we actually correspond to. You mentioned ayahuasca. Now, that is absolutely incredible when you look at how they figured that out, because you could take something like, where you get the constituents for dimethyltryptamine, DMT. And the problem with DMT for the longest time is that when they were able to create it and they tried to eat it, it would metabolize differently. You needed an MAO inhibitor. So you look at the acacia and you look at these various things. Somehow, I don't know whether it's the plant spirits or consciousness or what have you that started to communicate to them. But there was this one sect of Buddhists that was also very interesting, Julia, that I saw out there. And I don't know if you've ever heard of this, but there was a group of Buddhists that they would take out a notepad, and this is how powerful our minds are. They'd take out a notepad and they would take just little pieces of herbs throughout their lives, and they would meditate on it, and then they would memorize it, write it down. They'd never have to take it again. If they had like a headache or whatever it was, they could go back and they could just meditate on that
To
thing.
that moment, I've always said if you want to time travel, it's like through smell.
Oh my God.
I wonder
Some
if that's a
smells you just,
similar taste smell, like of like how, or like my dad, he would use he had this cherry chapstick and he would use Banaka like the first 5 years of my life. And there's times I'll smell those smells and I could go to specific moments in the car like that. I could go there, but you're bringing up something different. They were taking, huh?
Banaka, isn't that? No, never mind. That's not who Kanye is married to. But anyways, no, please
Banaka.
continue.
But you're talking. I have heard that. Yeah, I did a show with a guy. We dove into that, and we were talking about like monks meditating, levitating. We got into that. But what did they take to?
Well,
What did they take?
they were meditating on these things. It just shows you again the power of consciousness. But there's a whole different world out there when we look at these fields of atoms and information that are encoded in things. And one way I think that we can really start to see another interesting correlation there is that if you think about aspirin, people have known about aspirin for a very long time, thousands of years. The Egyptians knew about it, Native Americans knew about it, but in some groups, they knew if they had a headache, they would sit under a willow tree because the salicylic acid and all that, it's taken from the bark of willow trees.
What? That's my favorite tree. Willow trees are magical.
Isn't that a movie, a popular movie from the Willow? You know that one? But so I guess there's no correlation there, but you don't have the tree and the movie in your favorites. But with that, I think that trees really do talk to us. There's a secret life of trees. Look at the Druids that looked at them. We can learn so much about reality and also even our quantum computing. Do you remember on the last show we were talking with Andreas about how quantum computers work?
Mm-hmm.
Just thinking about trees, that you take that photonic exchange out of the leaves, they don't burn in the sunlight, and then the light comes down, there's a transbiotic accumulation, and then it's stepped down into starch, it's stepped down to sugars, and it moves down to the tree very, very fast, beyond anything we can comprehend. And then it goes for miles around, it's spreading out its branches. I truly believe that is the most fascinating thing about us.
Maybe that's like the fall of humanity was when the ancient large trees were cut down. I mean, they were enormous. And so, and even taking it to Game of Thrones, how they would go to the tree of they called them like the old gods, and they, before any big decisions or anything, like they went to the trees and prayed and spoke. That exchange of data though, of that you're getting. And there's so much when you talk to like a really advanced horticulture person that, is just wise with herbs, like when they know there's certain bark extra, like things you get from the bark and what they treat, what specific trees you get this and that from, like there's a whole nother world of advanced data in that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we learned so much from looking at how nature works, that through biomimicry. Steve Jobs did it. Victor Schauberger did it first, looking at all these things in these networks like like neural networks, like how mycelium forms under the ground. So all that's very interesting. But also, when we look over at your work and what you've really studied in water, I think that's also fascinating because we're made, we got that 98% water aspect to us. Do you think that in everything you've looked at, do you think water can be programmed?
Oh
Outside of
yeah.
the Emoto study, do you think that there's other things we can do with DNA with it, or what have you found?
Yeah, water is definitely programmed. And I think that, and the whole thing about the cerebral spinal fluid being one molecule different than seawater, you know, and I bring up a lot the whole quantum tunneling, like water has memory. Water is able to bilocate and trilocate, meaning that some water molecule can occupy multiple locations in space at the same time. So it could pass through solid walls. We discussed that, the quantum tunneling state, and where these particles can move through these energy barriers, and you apply that to just the star force. You apply that to all of it, of how that, I don't know, to me that is so telling, like that quantum, what was it, the walking through walls patent.
Yeah, that's crazy stuff. And using harmonic resonance, and you could do so much if you think about it. If we change the vibration of the atoms in your body, and that this isn't just some wild theory. This is actually what we are looking at with harmonic oscillation or harmonic resonance. That if we change the atoms in your body, that you would fall to the floor if they're not relevant to the floor below you. That's the theory of relativity. You could walk through walls. You could walk above the ground, anti-gravitics. You could disappear. You could go from one side of a mountain through it and end up on the other side of it. There's so much weirdness.
But what's important is like also our relationship with water, because it's reflective to our relationship with maybe a higher power, with God, of how do we treat water? Like we're just we're peeing in it, pooping. Like the type of water we have, a lot of it is just bombarded with microplastics. We should be drinking spring water. We're having this water that has fluoride in it. Our skin is our largest organ. It's seeping through that. There's like just the craziest thing. Our waters, they're treated, and there's pharmaceuticals in it, and the microorganism and viruses found in the water. And so I feel like our consciousness can raise, and our connection to Creator God, like can accelerate and be clearer when the type of water we drink and that we're fulfilling our bodies with, like when it's got the right nutrients in it, and it's like we're more, or you look at the living structured water. You just bought a hydrogen water bottle, right?
I did. I bought the hydrogen water bottle because you told me to buy it. I also got that Baja salt to get the electrolytes. But Julia, I wanted to switch lanes with you while we're talking on these interesting subjects and your research, because you've done a lot of deep diving. You've done deep diving into like these cuneiform tablets, all kinds of ancient sigils and civilizations. I want to talk to you a bit more about remote viewing, because that has been a very interesting subject lately, and we're going to have some guests on, as we've discussed, about LEMFs and looking at sine waves and looking how frequency can change the body. But as of recently, there have been not only those CIA documents about Project Stargate, but also Sunstreak, and looking at Robert Monroe's research that he did over at the Monroe Institute about the left and right hemisphere of the brain with hemisync, and how it relates to remote viewing when you move outside of that dichotomous thinking. When you remote view targets, I want to ask, do you use any particular system that you learned along the way, or is this something that you've always had, you've always been able to do?
I ran from it for a while. I always say, like, I wish a shaman would have came into my life at like 14. like, listen, young wise one, like, don't, like, it's almost, yeah, it's like I ran from it and probably made everything worse, or whatever. But when I really developed and stopped running from it and really worked at it, I mean, working at something, I had really profound results for a while, but then there was a period, like, I would work at it like every day and I didn't have profound results at it. So I had like this chunk of time in the beginning that was profound. And then I think it was teaching me, though, like, not to give up and to how to come up with my own system. But um I'm very what is the word when you I'm very, like, not religious, but I'm very regular about, I have to, like, shower before, I have to cleanse before I do it. I need everything
So it's like a
silent, like,
ritual.
clean. I'm ritualistic, but I don't like that. It's not that word. Not superstitious. There's another word. Somebody write it in the comments or something. But of where I like, I'm weird about the floors. Like, I always have to, like, disinfect and clean the floors, and, like,
I like that.
I shower, yeah, like, I
So
shower,
there's
take
a
a bath.
sacredness to it for you.
There's a sacredness to the environment, the cleanliness, because, even just, I'm not really big on sage, but for instance, when you burn sage, it clears the ions. Like, it literally makes a difference. And so, but I'm very, I noticed too, cane sugar will make a difference. Alcohol, drugs, like, it's good to be,
Can you stop there for a second?
mhm.
Is like, is it all sugar that gives you a problem? Like, or is there a connection with glucose or is it
Cane.
just
I've noted, well, cane sugar, so I was having profound results when I gave up, like, all, like, not even fruits too. And it was kind of got
interesting?
people really triggered too with me, where they were like, Julia, you can't cut out fruit. And um you need, like, there's a difference. But I mean, I was drinking a lot of distilled water too, and I was having I was having profound results. I was doing a ton of cleansing, and that was like next level of,
Wow.
the viewing results were unbelievable. And so I like sharing that because maybe it'll ignite somebody to try those things. But I just noticed, of, like, keeping your body clear and your room clear makes a difference. But okay, now I'm starting to sound like Howard Hughes or something.
Well, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I do believe that when you approach these things with a sacredness in your heart, when you approach them with that reverence, and you use, whether it's incense, essential oils, things like that, that you're cleansing, you're moving into that space. I do believe that you come through with a higher vibratory state. Many don't realize that when you walk down the street and you see like 1 to 2 people, you could magnify that by 7,000. There are gazillions of layers imposed on top of our world, and I think that the more that you raise your vibration, the more you cleanse your space. These are all very good things, and I think that that is an amazing way of looking at it. But also, I mean, these little markers that you're talking about, this is very interesting when you're saying that sugar and certain dietary things can stop you from your psychic awarenesses. And I believe that the ancient Egyptians knew this when they were taking this this monoatomic gold, that we'll call it, the orbitally rearranged monoatomic elements. They were decalcifying the pineal gland, but we can also do that with stuff like shilajit, which is humic and fulvic acid. I think that
Oh,
when
I
we
just got
look,
this new Shilajit that's liquid that, like, has been amazing. I got it in Sedona. It's amazing.
that is very cool, and that does work when you get good shilajit. There's other things that I think, when you and I have been talking about these peptides and all that, the greater things you could do for your brain, for your neuroprotectants, for health, for bringing in this alignment in the body, and also relaxing is very important to keep the mind and the brain in this this very interesting way. When you do astral projection, for example, you want to have your body completely relaxed. You want to relax every part of yourself and have the mind be able to push out. Do you find that coffee and stimulants do they enhance your ability? And how about alcohol?
I don't. I hate to say it, but I don't think coffee enhances it. I don't.
Interesting. What about alcohol? Do you find that it slows it down or stops it?
I've never tried. Wait, I think one time I might have, but like it's like I said, like it's like sacred to me, and I'll even go on the floor and like get very like in this very grateful state of mind, and like I have presentations I've done about how I had to be taught to ask for permission. Like I have this full, well, I don't know, Johnny, maybe you'd know that story if you would have gone to my presentation. Damn it. Mr. Johnny we were at a conference together.
I was remote viewing that presentation.
Uh-huh. So I'm sure. Yeah. So, okay. So tell the audience
no,
how I came to that. But yeah, no, I won't fully go into it, but I had to learn, as a newbie as I was also this, like, I don't know, I maybe was a little confident on some things. I didn't realize there's certain things have to be authorized, like on a higher spiritual plane, and having that type of respect, like you have all these different cultures that have what do they call altars, and they give things to some people, gods, but ancestors, and they'll leave out fruit, and they'll leave things for them, right? And it's you're honoring your elders, you're honoring your ancestors. And if you're honoring a hierarchy system too of there is, and what I've come across and just learned and was taught by something beyond here, of just there is levels to this, and there's things that are authorized and permitted, but to just waltz into these dimensions entitled, like, I'm gonna go here, I'm gonna find this out and that out, like you're not answering to anybody. Like, good luck with that. That's, I don't encourage that. But so yeah, I hope this is making sense.
It makes perfect sense that you're asking for permission to go to places. I was watching an interview the other day about a man that was alleged to have been involved with these remote viewing programs. And he said many of the times they were remote viewing our moon, and they got a direct message at the CIA, where he said the program that they were part of was the CIA. And he said that when they kept visiting there, that they got a warning, don't come back. Whatever was up there on the moon, just like John Lear was talking about, he said that we had a message when, with our own moon explorations with the Apollo missions, don't come back. That's why they.
Well, I'm not necessarily talking about, because there are barriers and things. I'm not fully referring to that. I'm talking way above and beyond that. But like, yeah, I feel like there are certain things that can, manipulate that or interfere with that or try to be that ultimate, like.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the best remote viewers of all time that we hear about, and everybody's heard of Dr. Hal Puthoff, Russell Targ, Ingo Swann, Uri Geller. One of the best, of course, of all time was Pat Price, and in the 80s he was a Burbank police officer, and he got brought into these particular programs, and these programs were really fascinating. The remote viewing programs, they used everything from frequency, all different kinds of training, mental fasting, things that they would do to open up the mind or distract one side of the mind or the other. And I've talked to some remote viewing instructors over at the Monroe Institute. And of course, I can definitely validate Julia. She's blown my mind and known many things before. And I don't want to get off topic of Pat Price, because I'm going to bring it back to him, and also forbidden places that you shouldn't go or ask for permission. But Julia, being very, very psychic and very much a remote viewer,
Johnny was in situations where he called upon me, and I so he had firsthand experience with me
Yeah,
with different targets and different,
I was
so he,
stuck in certain parts of the world, and sometimes got myself involved with some dangerous situations. And she was able to see what was going on, even things I didn't want her to see. So
yeah,
one of the
that's
things,
guilty. That is a
yeah,
true
no,
story.
having a friend that's a remote viewer, you get yourself in a bit of trouble here and there. But I want to say this, that with Pat Price, the crazy thing about him, we covered him on the Travel Channel on the Alaska Triangle show, because he had been viewing stuff up in Alaska, like Mount Denali and some kind of secret base, and also he was viewing stuff that was connected to the KGB, connected to the Soviets and stuff, all their kind of weapons and things. Pat Price was found, and this is a very famous remote viewer. For those of you who don't know, look him up. He was found with his back arched up very strangely. I believe it was in Las Vegas in his hotel room. His friends found him that way because he had been touching in an area where they had some sort of a detection system. Now, Julia, have you ever heard of this as like having a protective or a watching system that maybe some of these programs have as sort of a way to like put up a firewall for
Yeah,
remote
yeah,
influencers and remote viewers?
absolutely. I think Pat Price, this is brilliant that you brought it up because it supports a lot of what I'm saying, because it supports that careful what you look into, but also like he had incredible authorization. He was authorized. He had access levels. He was able to do things like nobody else could access and do. So that was something, because I was always like, it's soul technology. And it's like, is it DNA? Like, what do you mean soul technology? It's DNA combined with what type of soul that is acquired, like that receives like that gets the levels. Because I believe everybody, yes, can um access, like can remote view, can direct their consciousness, can do traveling clairvoyance, but there's some that are unbelievable. Now, what so I've always, what I've always wanted to understand, why these certain individuals, what is it about their DNA and their soul that gains that type of accuracy and access level? And it's just, you know, like that I want to know, like, why. And uh I did a show with Richard Allen Miller, Dr. Richard Allen Miller, and he spoke of uh these psychics, and there's a name for them. It starts with a D, but they it's like beyond remote viewing, like the things that they know, and they're able to um, get into that state of mind. That is just unbelievable, and that is another type of that type of clarity and accuracy is like why those souls, like the same similar thing of like how are they able to do that. And a lot of humanity, or a lot of people will be like, well, they're talking to demons, we're not, this is conjuring this, but it's like these people know things right away, just naturally. Like, a lot of this, what we've been taught, we have this system inside of our bodies, we produce this DMT and have these profound insights that we could tap into and develop more. So you're telling me that's wrong? Like that whole, like it's coming from fallen angels or demons. Like I kind of just reject that because it doesn't make sense. We have this divine technology inside of us, and we don't fully understand how to access it. Not to say that there's not some kind of demonic network or archonic field that can influence or accentuate that. But yeah, sorry, I'm kind of going off.
No,
Tony.
this is great. I'm really glad you brought that up, because there's a lot of persons of faith out there that believe that if you've had some sort of experience where let's say, for the traditional terms, that it's been clairvoyant, clairsentient, clairaudient, whatever it is, these things are all mentioned throughout the scriptures. These visions and experiences people had and where they went. Even in the Bible, you have a verse that's attributed to Paul, Saul of Tarsus. He goes, I had a friend in Christ about 14 years ago, whether in or out of the body, I do not know, he says, but I was caught up in the third heaven. And we have mentionings of a silver cord, like astral projectors talk about. So I think a lot of these things are very fascinating, but we know our militaries have studied this. The CIA has studied this. The Russians most certainly, in psychic discoveries behind the Iron Curtain. You have J.B. Ryan at Duke University, traditionally looking at ESP cards in America. They took that very seriously. You go back and even to the parapsychology studies that were done by even the likes of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who gave us Sherlock Holmes. These things are abilities we all have. And the question is, are there means that we have now, like it's being discussed in the channel here by Jab Customs, and talking about the different hemispheres of the brain, like Robert Monroe was talking about, of how we could use stuff like binaural beats or frequencies or sound or distracting ourselves. Have you guys ever seen that show? What's that show, Julia, where there's that medium from LA and it's a guy, I think he's constantly like moving his pen. Have you ever seen that?
Isn't it Tyler?
It's
Tyler
Tyler
Perry?
something.
Is it Tyler Perry?
Chat, yeah, chat. If you know, let us know the name. But I've seen a few people do that where they're distracting the brain. One technique one of these remote viewing instructors told me that they do is to distract, the left side of the brain. So get that more logical side out. They will think about something like some mundane task like mowing the lawn or driving the car and just getting the brain off of that and then going and shifting into that middle space. And again, the training I've heard over and over again is to go into the very center of your being. Now, another interesting thing, Jules, that I'd love to talk about is when you look at this idea of remote viewing. What about remote influencing? And I know that they've used this before. The remote influencing, be able to, let's say, pierce an electron shell or change atoms or influence a person or a situation. Have you yourself ever experienced that or looked into that?
I've always looked for, like, secretly, I've always had this, like, dream of finding people that are, like, have a certain access level and that are accurate and remote view. They don't even have to have like years of experience, but that they're capable and they do it, and that and I'd love to like come together with. I've always kind of like looked for people like that, but then I kept getting disappointed because people would be like, "Oh, I remote view, or I could do this and I could do that," and then I'd get super excited, and then it turned out like no, it wasn't accurate, or I don't know what I don't know what they were doing. So then it was something I kind of put in the back burner. But I would love to get together and have a group and of people with that are passionate and have pure intentions and do things to combat certain things or agendas that happen here. Because in the study that you're talking about, like they did remote influencing and they changed the stock market, but just coming together and combating that, because it's interesting because we all have these abilities, but what are people doing at night? Going to a bar or watching the news or a movie or scrolling on TikTok and doing these things when they could be developing that, or they'd rather go to a psychic and be like, hey, what's going on with this? Or pull tarot cards. But very few people want to sit in a room and just clear their mind and empty their mind and meditate, because it's not instant gratification. We're instant gratification. We've become this spoiled, society where we want things instantly and now. But a lot of people will get frustrated with not knowing, like they'll over worry or over stress when, a lot of the times if they quiet their mind and meditate, they could tap into a field where they'll know what's going to happen, or like they'll see what they need to do or what needs to be done, and have a type of serenity with that.
Yes, I would like to think that this phenomenon, this aspect of remote viewing has been around a very long time. And I do believe our ancestors and very ancient hominids knew about it. Two good theories I've heard about this. Of not only we've heard about psychic abilities, we've heard about those who have looked into dreams, even the dream time of the Aborigines in Australia. But when it comes to telepathy and these abilities, I've often heard from the likes of Brian Forrester, who told me that when he's looked at these elongated heads that are in Paracas, for example, and we've all seen them, with some believe that this is why Osiris in Egypt was a giant with an elongated head, or why the Pope wears the mitre of Dagon or Nimrod. And we see that there's artificial head binding all over the world. But in Paracas, the skulls are very interesting, as I know you guys have seen them and Julia's seen them. These skulls, there's a different area when we look over at the sagittal suture, where you can look at the base of the skull, that it's further back, and it supports a naturally larger head. And when you see this large cranial area, as well as it has a totally different haplogroup than our basic groups, like you go to A, B, C, D, and or A, B, C, and X, and all that. You have this type of different genetic classification of, instead of Homo sapiens sapiens, it's Homo sapiens Paracas. So Forrester's often said to me, he said, well, could the larger heads mean that perhaps they had psychic abilities like telepathy? Is this the reason why in the very, very ancient Egypt, before the dynastic Egyptians came, or even before the pre-dynastics, that the most ancient stuff we find in Egypt had no hieroglyphics whatsoever, and that it was just basic, like really sophisticatedly cut granite, that they didn't need any sort of written languages, that this was something that they possessed. And even when we look over, again, back over, let's say, into our religious texts, even the Bible, in the book of Matthew, it says that Jesus knew the thoughts of those around him. He knew that evil was on their mind. Do you think that these things are all tied together, Julia? Do you think that telepathy is tied in with the same people that might have the ability to have remote viewing? Do you think that the people that have the ability to communicate with consciousness after it's gone on, for the lack of a better term, mediums, do you think they're all part and parcel, part of the same package? Are they unique gifts?
I feel like I like to think we all were just like this telepathic, like everybody was, but maybe that's why there were certain rooms carved all over the world different, or cathedrals, to help get, like, maybe it was really easy for some beings and for some tribes, if they were more pure tribe or something, or maybe certain DNAs or souls, it was much easier, and then some needed the assistance of acoustics and all this other stuff, but also, like, God, I just can't get the thought of, like, those cranial heads, like what dating would be like with somebody with that size head, and like if their brain power and like telepathy power was just off the charts, if you were, like, how dating would be. And like
it comes back to that, I do think that in the future, as far as what our futurists are saying, you will have an augmented receiver and an optical display. So it's already here, but it's not going to be like the Model T4 version that we see right now with Neuralink, that is just accessing a very small amount of synapses. You're going to have the ability to full on go into a movie theater, go on a date, go wherever you are, and you're going to be able to interact with things in front of you, to listen to music that no one else can hear. You probably, in all likelihood, if you were in that dating mode, you could go out and you could go meet the person virtually first. And I think that's where we're going with Meta. I think that's the real race to get into that position with AI, like we talked about in previous shows, is that convergence of consciousness we're seeing right now, these virtual experiences. I just wonder when we're going to cross that threshold of reality, between reality and that world we're entering right now, because AI is getting so damn close that even when we look at those AI videos that you were generating or talking about, that is. But
Johnny, that's the thing too, is like I'm discussing of the thought, or that a lot of people don't want to quiet their mind and meditate and connect that way. They want to log in and be told, to be given the answers, and we're going to be headed more and more in that direction. So if we could just balance the two out and connect naturally to our creator mainframe, and also use the technology like and have it to where one doesn't where that doesn't become dominant. And it just seems like that's the direction we're headed.
I agree with you. I think that people are going to have all these experiences, from drugs to sex with robots or sex with AI. They're going to have the ability to interact in all sorts of ways. I really think that, like, when you look at a Tesla car today, and I think electric cars are very cool, and I'm not knocking them at all, but there's not enough material currently on the planet to create enough Teslas or enough electric cars for everyone. When you look at the nickel, the cobalt, the boron, the iron, it's like that's the stuff we're going to make robots out of. That's the stuff that we're going to be interacting with in all kinds of new ways as we go out into the stars and we explore. And I have a theory, Julia, that I don't believe that we are going to be able to get to the stars as far as we want with our descendants, maybe not today's humans, without that touch of transhumanism. And I know a lot of people don't want to talk about that, but when Deep was on the show at the beginning today and he had lost his connection, he's coming back with us, of course. He just had everybody, even Daniel Brinkley tonight when we were talking to him, he was having issues with his connection. There's something going on out there.
And Tony too. They all three connections.
Tony Rodriguez too. So yeah, we have a bunch of really cool guests coming on, and even astrophysicists. Cool stuff coming up for you guys. But if we can just get the sun or cyberspace to behave. But I think in the future, we're going to have a very similar scenario as to what Deep was talking about. He said that the ETs that came into his room, and you asked a very important question. You said, oh, what were these jumpsuits like they're wearing, right? You wanted to know what they were made of. And he said,
yeah, cool. What color? Like, what are they rocking? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that is cool. Were they wearing Christian Dior? Were they wearing, what was it? Like some alien designer? But anyhow, the cool thing is that he was saying it was like a nanomaterial. And I think in the future, you're going to have like micro tissues on your skin that can change. I think that the medicine, as well as that configuration of how we bend reality, is going to be there. Because if you go out into space, let's say one of you right now that's watching, if you get taken, if you get abducted, if you were contacted by aliens, what's going to happen immediately is that there's going to be things that change in your own physiology. Your atomic structure is going to change. Your circadian rhythms are going to change. You're going to be off. And it's something that Julia always brings up with the Schumann resonance, which is like 7.83 hertz in frequency. You need to have that even to go into space to feel normal after a while. That's why humans can't go on Mars right now. You'd have to have them born in an incubator, or they wouldn't be able to last that long up there. We are going to be moving into that space to even go out to the stars. So who knows how that's
I think
work.
Circling back too, of like the plants have all the answers, and we have this dynamic DNA inside of us, and getting to an advanced point where we can certain modalities and tinctures and things that we could take to unlock things in our mind and, you know, our bodies to be, because I feel like we need to be more like higher performance. Like there's Definitely. Things weighing us down here. So certain modalities, like you and I were geeking out over BPC 157, like the peptide, you know, of like that's healed so many people's guts. And it's like repaired, like people are like, I had surgery twice on my shoulder and it didn't cure it, but I took BPC 157 and, you know, 22 days later, I'm freaking healed, you know, where it had amazing results. And the thing is like, that's where I think a lot of damage has been done to us. So, you know, one could argue like, well, I mean, everything you need is in nature, and like, you don't need to take anything to make you more divine. But I think there's ways of becoming more higher performance. And it's in a sense like combating these things that have slowed down our growth and slowed down our performance. So I feel like, I feel like that needs to be done.
I think so too. And I think a combination of these things, like the BPC 157 being a peptide, is amazing for that, getting rid of inflammation and moving through that. But we've talked about peptides before, with how there are, you know, proteins and amino acids as these messengers. You have powerful things that people take in IVs, even like glutathione, which is systemic. You have alpha lipoic acid that can go on the inside of you. But I mean, even the stuff that we look at with the frequencies, the brain, we talk about plants talking to us, and most certainly we see right
Well,
now within
Johnny,
memory.
I think what I'm trying to say is like that's synthetic. Like what I'm trying to maybe say of like we're having to take these synthetic versions of things that like the NAD is synthetic, the glutathione is synthetic, and so I may not be fully open of taking these synthetic things, but like there's so many like you need glutathione. Like there's so many things that of going synthetic on certain things, and I'm not fully like I don't fully condone it, but I don't know. I just think that we need help. We need all the help we can get.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating what we're learning. I mean, all pharmaceuticals is that we take these things from nature, we will extract them into an oil, then we dry them out, we synthesize them, we extract the essentials from them. So for example, one really cool thing is when you think about your olfactory nerve that you breathe things in with, if you traditionally would breathe in rosemary, you'd smell rosemary, it would enhance your memory. And it would help. I believe it even helps with intuitive faculties. But
and it
now
stimulates your hair growth. Like rosemary has so many good like
it is. But now from rosemary and sage, we take from them the oil we extract from them. You can get this, and this is like huge breakthrough for Parkinson's, as well as when you look at the synapses, the Lewy bodies repairing them. You have an idea with carnosine that comes from that. The acid that people are using. People will take stuff like, for speaking of Parkinson's, they will take stuff like L-Dopa because it's an L-Dopa deficiency. And there's a bean that you guys can get that's kind of like a stinging nettle that is called Mucuna pruriens, and we call it the God bean because it creates L-Dopa or dopamine and serotonin. All these things like opening up, firing up the brain, the pathways, the body, having that body fired up is amazing. I think one of the coolest things when we look at how our bodies work, going back to what you said at the beginning, Julia, is that we work on energy. This is what Tesla was after. This is like he wanted to go right to the source. That the fact that these mitochondria that we have is just exchanging electrons. And I think once we boost that up, it's incredible. Like Danyan, who was supposed to be here, he gets struck by lightning. He's dead for 28 minutes. He goes to the other side, comes back with these profound psychic abilities. And a lot of people don't know this, but how he got his big movie made that Eric Roberts played him in is he was gambling, and he would go out to these blackjack tables and all this shit, and he would go out there gambling, and he would all of a sudden he'd go, "Watch this, everybody," and he would just tell everybody that he was going to know what the results were. And he impressed some TV producers that were there. He would just like get kicked out of casinos because he was winning so much. His psychic abilities were through the roof. So I definitely think that there's something with that energy, frequency, vibration. Once you get it, tap into those secrets, you got it.
The lightning just like connected him to that other realm. Like there was no barriers.
Oh, there's no barriers. When he gives you a hug, you feel it. Like he comes up, he's got this big hug way that this energy, like he electrifies the room, like electrocutes. Have you ever had one of his Danyan hugs the last time?
Yes, it's on my Instagram as well. In my video from Conscious Life Expo, it literally shows it in slow motion. I have a slow motion hug, Johnny. Boom. We have to put, when Danyan comes on, you got to put the slow motion hug on. He's going to love that. I should have it up and just have it playing, or just make it be the background of just me and Danyan slow motion hugging over and over.
Do you know what I love about Danyan and Nita Morjani, all the NDErs? Because I've been obsessed with near-death experience people for a very long time. I know you have too. You've looked at NDEs.
My mom dude, you guys, I was born during a near-death experience. Can you believe that? I'll get into it later, but I was literally, my mom was outer body when she had me.
That's why you turned out the way you did.
I was connected to another realm, and I probably induced it. I'm going to tell Danyan that too.
The one thing is with these people is that they're all different, and they've gone through the 360-degree panoramic life review. They've experienced this idea of standing aside and watching themselves go by, that they know that there's more to all of us, and they don't have a fear of death anymore, but there is this knowing and this awareness, that's this configuration that we have, this unique configuration of the here and now. But I didn't hear, I've never heard that story before, Jules.
I know, I'm saving it. I'm saving it for
saving
Danyan. Yeah, and I'm gonna bust it out when Danyan comes on.
Yeah, that'll be a good one. But I'll tell you a Danyan story. This is kind of a fun story. He's got lots of weird stories with him. And I was sitting backstage with George Norrie was on stage. We were doing this George Norrie live tour, and Danyan and I were in the back, and he's talking to everybody. Look, everybody, nobody dies. No one dies, period. I could tell you because I was there. And then Tom Danheiser was in the back. This is George's producer. So many
I
of
love
you.
Tom. Shout out Tom Danheiser.
Shout out to Tom Danheiser, who loves the Kings, by the way, right?
Go Kings. Yeah.
Go Kings. So we're all sitting there talking about how crap our lives are in certain ways. And what wasn't really that crap. I was, pretty grateful for everything I had, up to that point. So Tom Danheiser said something about how he doesn't really want to find out what happens when you die or something. I don't know what he said. But I said to Danyan, I said the same deal I made to Jordan Maxwell. I said, look, if one day, because I call him Bubba. He always calls me Bubba. It's a Southern thing. I say, hey, look, Bubba, if like I said to Jordan Maxwell, if you die first, will you give me a sign when you reach the other side? And then let me know that everything's okay. He goes, I'll tell you what, Johnny, when I come back, I'm going to burn your goddamn house down. And I thought to myself, that's not a very nice sign. But the one thing is that I've also found with NDEers is that they have a great sense of humor. They look at life a little differently, and they look at how everyone is a reflection of them. And I think that's one of the psychic techniques that Danyan taught me. He says how he became so psychic is he realized that on a very, very powerful, transformative level that everybody is us. And he says he literally becomes the other person, and he puts himself into that other person, and then it starts to mirror back into him. There's like this transference of consciousness that takes place. Something that we all should remember when we interact with others.
Dude, I do that, Johnny, and I'll tell you, it complicates things here.
I know it does.
It's not, sometimes it can not work for me. It can work against me, like feeling them and understanding. But dude, yeah, hilarious. He is hilarious. And I have noticed that a bit. It's almost like the near-death experiencers see the bigger picture and just are live in their hearts.
Do you know the other thing? I agree with you, Jules. They really do. But do you know the other thing is that he told me that really surprised me? Everybody wants to meet their spirit guide. Well, he tells me that he said, "Oh shit, you can have my spirit guide." I said, "Why?" And he goes, "My spirit guide's name is Alex, and he's a real prick." And I got a video of him. I'm saying that we were traveling together, and he goes, "Alex only comes around when I've been doing bad." And he's a real asshole. And he told me that Alex is like one of those spirit guides that really pushes you. And this, all joking aside, we all come into this world with a life plan. We all come into this world with help. We're not alone. And, we can tap into it. But he just cracks me up because he said, "Oh, shit, I don't like talking to mine very much." He said, "Everybody wants to meet their spirit guide." He says, "Well, you could have mine." And
I remember that story I love it every time you tell it. But I remember it as like, my spirit guide fucking hates me. His name's Alex, and he wears what is a Cuban hat, a white, a three-piece white suit.
Apache. Yeah, he says, he shows up. He goes, "Oh shit, I've been driving around," and all of a sudden he shows up. I'm like, "Oh, what are you doing here?" And he said that his spirit guide is as real as you or I. It would show up there. But, a lot of people have these interactions, with different beings and energies, guides and stuff. But it seems like those that have had the NDEs,
But that's when we
have
get into trouble, Johnny. Is like we get warned, we get forewarned. You can look at that as your spirit. Like, how often do we go against what we're guided to do, or we don't listen to that guidance system? So that's what makes it so funny. It's funny.
I agree, Jules.
True,
like
Daniel.
when that happens to you, that it's usually because you've been told so many times. People think that all of a sudden there's some horrible thing is happening to them. They think that happened overnight. No, the source, universe, the unified field, whatever you want to call it, that our consciousness is all a part of. The universe is very intelligent. It's constantly communicated to you in a form of patterns, numbers, anomalies, everything that you can see that Carl Jung called synchronicities. And when you have to get bopped on the head so many times, eventually you'll get Alex showing up. That's Daniel.
You see that 3-piece suit, boy, you better run. You better start doing different.
That's what he said. But, that's always made me think that there's maybe something different in the maybe the neurodevelopment or something with people that have the ability to talk to those on the other side. There seems to be a differentiation from, let's say, those who are just like clairvoyant or they hear something. Some people, like you were talking about smells, some people will get a smell. They'll smell their grandfather's cigar or their mother's perfume or something when they come around. It's very interesting how our regular senses are connected to the extrasensory perception.
Yeah.
You're like, where's Alex?
Yeah, where's Alex?
We have some comments coming in here. We have one from Cuton. Life review, light and darkness, peaceful womb return. That's interesting. In the work of Dr. Michael Newton, you get a lot of ideas about people that have memories after they, of what it was like after they died, coming here, picking their bodies beforehand. Have you ever looked at that, Julia? Because I know that you're into the clinical hypnotherapy. Have you ever looked at these cases of life between lives?
What do you mean, life between lives?
Dr. Michael Newton, he was a PhD in behavioral psychology. He did a lot of Ericksonian hypnotherapy. He worked with people when they had these various issues. And one of his clients came in one day, and this guy was an atheist, this Dr. Michael Newton fellow. And what was very interesting is he had this one client that came in and had a World War I memory of a psychosomatic pain that they had that they just couldn't get over. They said, what the hell is causing this? So Newton does a clinical hypnotherapy session on him, and he finds out, just like in the case of Dr. Jim Tucker over at the University of Virginia with all those children that had past life memories, he found out this guy had memories of being a soldier. Newton, being an amateur historian, goes up and looks up the badge number, calls the War Museum, verifies it. He goes on to do thousands of these cases. He turns his entire practice over doing what he calls the life between lives protocol. And it's fascinating how many people remembered making these life plans, doing a life review.
But much Johnny, like I wonder if some of those are attachments. We've talked about this, of like how, in certain hypnosis sessions, once they cleared the attachment, the memories of that were no longer there. Like that's like kind of that's kind of taking it quantum of
like an entanglement.
Yeah.
I could see that, but
that spirit, but yeah.
What if, Julia, though, what if I could see where that might be the case with some of these, like somebody that has these memories that they're coming to them. But what if you had these certain traits in your life? So like when we see these young savants that know how to play the piano from a young age, or they know art, music, you yourself have probably been to a coffee shop before. You saw Alex, Daniel's guide, and you just felt this affinity for somebody, or you had this total antipathy. You couldn't stand them. There's some people that they might get answers by doing this sort of review. Do you yourself believe in reincarnation or transmigration?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I was 8 years old, like telling my family I believed in reincarnation. And I was like, just really, I couldn't really find any data on it.
Well,
I felt I believed in it, like an 8-year-old, I was like, what? And then I remember hearing about Scientology, and I was like, you guys, do they know about reincarnation? And someone in my family was like, probably. Where do you
it's
go
interesting. it's interesting you brought up Scientology, and we talk about even the very interesting history of L. Ron Hubbard and all these kind of strange things that went on in his life. But with Scientology, what do you think about what is the attraction? Since you live out there, you live near the Hollywood madness that's out there. What is the attraction to celebrities, movie stars, and such to Scientology?
Mm, I feel like it's like data, of like what they, and you need to bring this up with Andreas because, oh my God, he will read you like he's Dianetics 101.
Is
Like
he a
he will apply it.
Scientologist?
No, he's just very, him and Brittany are very knowledgeable in the system that they use of how they hook you of like what modalities they use to bring up certain things where it will almost like autocorrect or have you have an epiphany and how that's like this Andreas or Brittany is the perfect person to bring up that question of why of that.
Yeah, I mean, it usually seems like guys that are signing up for Scientology, and just in case there are any Scientologists watching, I don't want to upset anybody out there, but Tom Cruise, so let's say he had a certain predilection towards something, and there's no judgment here, nothing wrong with that. He signs up and tries to try to correct himself or something that might not even need to correct.
No, he was dyslexic, and
that's what I'm talking about.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's dyslexia. So he was he was corrected. But who else was a famous member?
But I think that I think that it goes back to humanity, like, have gotten lazy and just the information, not understanding how they can retrieve data and different, of what they could tap into for answers and wanting to be told things and like, oh, they know I'm going to, and, and it was Leah Remini was always, it's like you're working up the system and you're promised you're going to be, you're going to know all of it. You're going to, so it's like dangling the carrot. You're paying all this money and it's, we're going to basically debrief you at this one point. You're almost there and you're almost there and you're almost there. But then believing that they have all the answers when really all that time and energy where it could have been, spent kind of going inside and.
Well, there was a bit of that. I heard that L. Ron Hubbard and Jack Parsons were out. They were out over at where Area 51 is today.
I thought it was by the Salton Sea. That they were by Area 51.
Well, yeah. According to the story, this was told to me by the late Jim Nichols. He was an amazing UFO artist. He was a good friend of mine. I met him over the years, and he's no longer with us. But he did all these incredible Palladian pictures that people use and all this like 1950 style art. It was amazing, man. So well researched. He and I would have these back and forths and give our own little mini lectures on the way to these conferences in the back of whatever it is, a bus or whatever. And he was telling me he had done a real deep dive in L. Ron Hubbard, and he said that L. Ron Hubbard and Jack Parsons from JP Laboratories, they were doing a certain how do we put this? Aleister Crowley like ritual that was called. They were sodomizing each other allegedly. Those were Jim Nichols's words, and this was quite common in these sort of magical circles and practices. And he claims allegedly this was done in these areas because where Area 51 is based in Rachel, Nevada, this was on the 33rd parallel. He said so. He said it was a place of high energy. There's a lot of strange things that start.
I'm on the 33-degree parallel.
What's that?
I'm on the 33rd-degree parallel.
Yeah, it's interesting. They Disneyland is also. That's the crazy stuff. Your friend Walter Bosley talks about that in Key to the Kingdom. He's talking about the fact that when Disneyland was put together, speaking of remote viewing, we talk about Stanford Research Institute, SRI. There's two guys, what was it, Cornelius Vanderbilt Wood and Buzz Price, Buzz and Woody. They were contracted to put that out in Orange County at 1313, like Master Mason or Mickey Mouse, South Harbor Boulevard over in Anaheim. So they go put it there, and they put the 33rd parallel there down that middle of that Orange Grove where it was, and the castle was where the influx of the energy is. And supposedly the carousel that was originally in Fantasyland was supposed to be like a Tesla coil to spin the energy out into the rest of the park. So you live in a magical place.
Dude, my dad's restaurant and deli and bakery was like stone throw away from Disneyland, like right there.
I know. I think that's amazing. By the way, Julia, you have a question in here. It says, Jab Custom says, Julia, do you know if you're a star seed?
No, I don't know that. Because what is a star seed? You know what I mean?
Ooh.
What star are we talking about? What do you know? I don't know.
Well, I'm assuming they're talking about the fact that if you know, if
I don't feel like I'm from around here.
You're from around the way.
I'm not from around these parts.
I love that. I think we all are kind of star seeds. Wouldn't you say that we're all sort of hybrids on this journey
I love that.
together?
I made a meme like 4 years ago that's like they tried to bury us, but they forgot we were star seeds. Like we're gonna grow.
I like that. That's why we're here. We're here to grow and evolve.
Yeah, they try to keep us down, but we're seeds. We're gonna bust out through that.
Yeah, I like that. We are growing. We're coming out of our shells, and I think that's what this period is all about. Whether you want to call it, approaching the singularity, or you want to talk about expansion of consciousness, and we're definitely doing it. There's so many different means that we've discussed tonight.
Expansion.
I
want to talk to expansion.
Oh my God, that's usually happens to me at around Christmas time. Just eating everything. And I always have these
expansion
sets sides of my closet for the expansion times of the year. But Julia, we had an interesting show. We started off with Prasad.
We shot from the hip, but I think the stuff you and I like in our minds, like we're like, oh man, that was horrible. But it's like our regular conversation.
Is a show.
It's a show and a half.
It is a show.
Guarded.
What's that?
This is us trying to be proper and if guarded a little bit.
Yeah, the stuff we usually talk about, that it'd probably be like I don't know, it wouldn't be appropriate for most listeners. But I think that just because it's like one of those rap albums that says parental advisory advised, because it's a little bit more colorful in the language, but. The one thing is that I do believe that these subjects are so important that everybody's talking about them now. They're asking questions. They're looking at these materials. There's so many streaming platforms popping up with these sort of documentaries, these sort of questions, people coming forward. And what's really great about shows like this, or like the folks that are commenting here, is that with all of you having the courage to come out with your own stories. So if you hear Julia talking about remote viewing, or you hear someone talking about an ET contact experience, you can educate others. You can educate your family. You can educate your friends. And I love seeing that now where it's becoming so mainstream. So that's why we got to do more of it.
Yeah. I mean, I think you are seeing this constant, hey, look at this CIA study. Look at this Monroe. Like it's pretty much kind of pointing you and to go inside, and certain things that could sink the right hemisphere and left hemisphere of your brain, and that going to those deep states of consciousness, those altered states of consciousness, and really developing, and or certain like tanks, or where you're shut off like from outside signals and Bluetooth, and like to really have a sacred space to develop that and access that. I think that's why it keeps coming up, but I just want more people to do the work, because it's getting lazy with it, of you could get of not wanting to do that, or people will go to do it for 15 minutes a night and fall asleep because they get into that like theta brainwaves and they're like at peace, and then they doze off.
I totally agree with you. And you mentioned the hemispheric aspects of the brain. One thing I'm reminded of with that is I heard a very interesting theory from one of these folks that we talked to that is let's just say that they're involved with programs where they've had sort of information that the public doesn't usually get in their history textbooks. And again, there's so much, as Julia could tell you, that's not in our history books. But one idea that has been put forward is that we've had a few Garden of Edens with they call the Garden of Eden, like, let's say, a genetic birthplace where there's been manipulation of DNA and other things that have gone on. Well, maybe one was about 600 to 800 million years ago. Maybe you had something in Australia. Maybe you had another one between the Tigris and the Euphrates River, like the more recent story we've heard. And you hear the story about Cain and Abel. Now, what's really interesting about Cain and Abel, if you go back to Manly Palmer Hall's Secret Teachings of All Ages, we're told about the cerebrum in the brain. And you hear the murder that goes on with Cain, and he has a marking and goes out into the world. Well, the ancients used to call that area where we see this murder of the equilibrium, they called that part Cain and Abel, which is interesting. So again, this balance, this evolution, these steps that we're taking, I think that when you talk about star seeds, well, we all have this DNA in us. It's all there. Julia, what were you saying before? How much information can be stored in DNA according to our latest estimates?
It's 455 exabytes. And
Jeez.
that's just 1 gram of DNA. So there's a 1.8 zettabytes like in the world, and you
Good
could
Lord.
store all of that on 4 grams of DNA. So like everything, you're talking the internet, you're talking every book, every music, like all of it on just 4 grams of DNA. So
My God, can you
is that
imagine?
what we're doing here? Is that what they're doing? They're just storing the data?
So you're saying
Johnny?
that P. Diddy's house has more information around it than even the internet itself.
Hey,
This-
yo.
But the mind-boggling thing about that, to bring it back to plants, and the fact that Francis Crick, let's say, over 50 years ago, gave us this discovery of DNA while he was on LSD, allegedly. And there's so much as we go down that rabbit hole, even of seeing how DNA works, how it's like an antenna that, that it's got this windings and duplexing for distance, that we're receiving a signal, we're receiving it from somewhere else. And that when we look at consciousness now, as we understand it fundamentally, that we believe that there's a non-locality to it. Do you believe that consciousness is created in the brain, Julia, or do you think we're receiving it as a signal
Hell
from
no.
elsewhere?
No. I feel like it's connecting to like a mainframe, or just even thought forms as well. Like you'll feel certain things and it's like, God, I was feeling this type of way. And it's like you find out your neighbor, like, you were feeling a certain way, and you find out your neighbor was having this experience or fell down, or then had to call the paramedics, but you were feeling of picking up on those, of the field around you, and picking a lot. I think a lot of people don't understand how to differentiate between things, outside things they're sensing, and some of them are large distances between. I think Deepak has a great book about explaining that. Like, you ever think about somebody you haven't thought about in 10 years, and then they call you
Yeah.
the next day. It's like, did they, it's that type of Jedi signal. Did they receive the signal, and then boom, like you thought about them, they got the signal, and so sometimes it's just, even Rob Potter passed away yesterday. He was supposed to come down here, or he did come down here. We were supposed to have dinner together, and but I've had so much going on over the last week. I was in I had a lot thrown out. I had a lot going on. Right? It was a very interesting, great week, super productive, but it was wild. It was just all over the place. So I had a lot of coming at me and a lot going on. And I kept thinking about Rob. And, but I kept seeing, I had so much going on. It was like, when you have so much you're processing, and things were popping up a lot, and I'm just trying to follow it and roll with it. And then but it kept then showing me like his car. And I was like, this is so weird. I never see this car and I'm seeing this car. And so I know better. I know better. You follow those things. They come up for a reason. It's not an accident. If something keeps popping up, whether it's a song, whatever, the synchronicity and the urging. And I ignored it because I had so much going on. And but normally I would have known, and I wish I would have, then contacted, because it's communicating with you, right?
I totally agree with you. And you get these synchronicities through a number of ways. I see that the channel's blowing up, people talking about owls and that connection with you and owls. You have an owl at the end of your desk, you have owls in the background, and birds have not only communicated to people a lot of the time, giving them signs, but I think there's just something about the owl. I mean, you can talk about what the owl means to you and your experiences. I'm sure your listeners know, but the owl always has that area, like the ibis bird, of wisdom, being able to see what's out in the darkness and see that which cannot be perceived. Kind of like Athena was represented by it, or Minerva, right?
Yeah, it just reminded me of Robert Potter too, because we went and saw Xanadu. We went to Pageant the Masters.
Wow.
We saw Xanadu, and it was after Xanadu, because I didn't realize that I was talking about this white owl that shows up and goes where I go, but I didn't realize, like, a lot of people didn't believe me because I wasn't really posting much about it. I was capturing it, but I thought these people knew me so well. Rob Potter was one of those people. I thought he knows me so he knows I'm like, I don't just say shit. So
No, you certainly don't.
So I told him, but then when we got out of the car, because when he visited, he was staying at my place, and when he got out of the car, he jumps and is like, "Oh my god!" Because the white owl landed like right above his car, right above his head, like almost at eye level. He goes, "Dear God, you weren't kidding! I didn't believe you. Like, you keep talking about this white owl. I didn't believe you, but wow!" And then he like locked eyes with it, and they had this moment, and I realized that anyone that I will be with, when they connect with it or they see it, something changes within them. And then I'll ask them. So I'll ask them the same question. I'm like, because they're always in like disbelief. And I'll say, what do you think that is? Like, and he
Yeah,
goes,
you always have them. I'll be talking to you. And there's been a few times, and the owls just swoop up and they're just hanging out with you, and they're like right outside your window. They're keeping guard, or they're flying above you as you're
but
going
even when I
places.
was traveling, like I was talking to you in the Midwest, and I was like,
That's right.
Johnny, I call Johnny with some wild stories. I'm like, Johnny, I had a dream last night. It was so weird. It was a dream, and it was an owl, and he's walking, like waddling, and then he pulled a feather out, and then he walked. And I remember being like, when I woke up, like, that's so weird. And then there was an owl feather in the backyard that day. Like, so it was like,
That's crazy.
within an hour and a half after that, of waking up and having that dream. So people will be like, Julia, people will think this is some kind of demonic thing. This is a very powerful symbol to me. This is, the Vesica Pisces and the living structured water that's coming up from the earth. And I do, I have visions, and so that's the eye symbolism of that, and just the conjugation, the phosphine conjugation, and your eyes emitting biophotons, and
Wow.
this is a key, and she, I like that, it's copper. That's a whole nother thing of the copper world and green. Anyway, so this is like incredibly deep. I could go deeper, but that's all I'm going to say about it. But for me, and it's like just quite the opposite. And I've gone on shows where they'll be so judgmental over it and interpret it. And it's like, then you're not meant to hear me. Like, if that's what you interpret, like, I'm not here to convince you. But the owl for me is very significant, and I have so many stories with it. And there'll be times where I'll be in the house and I'll get this urge, like, go outside. It's not clairaudient either. It's like all of a sudden this urge to go outside, and it's such a different type of clairvoyant thing, where I'm like, I don't want to go outside, but it didn't say go outside. It's just like this feeling. It's like a feeling, and that maybe is what telepathy really is. But and I'm like, I don't want to. And it was like, yeah, and then the urge and the tugging to the point where I'm like, okay, fine. And then this particular night, I went and it came out of the trees and like flapped its wings and stared into my soul. And the wingspan was huge. And then it like spiraled and spun out. But like it was like came out and I jumped and had that moment with it. And to have that wingspan that large and to connect with the eyes, it was like, oh wow. So, and I always get very grateful and emotional when I see it, when I feel it, when it's so, there's so many layers to it for me. So when people will assume like this is some kind of Illuminati or weird evil worship, and it's totally not. That's not how I feel about it. But
it makes perfect sense. Owls have been associated with these amazing mysteries for a very long time, and I'm trying to think of the name of this book that Richard Dolan showed me. He published this book by a guy that he knows that did this huge lot of work on. It's Mike is his name. I'd have to go look up the book, but he did this study about people that had these experiences with the Greys. And every time these gray ETs would come around, they'd see owls. The owl very particularly was associated with them. And that almost makes me think that with the owls, or even in Native American shamanism or other shamanic traditions, they've talked about, again, this shape-shifting or this transpositioning of consciousness when in meditation. Talk about entanglements, be able to entangle your consciousness like Avatar into an owl or something, and it coming as a messenger of opening up things. But owls in particular seem to be really powerful messengers there, hence Athena, hence Minerva. But yeah, the owl is so important to you that at one of your last talks you did, I can't remember, it was Sedona, that you had it on your nails. You even had the nails down with a white owl.
I did.
So people see you rocking the white owl, now they know.
And look, my sister got this for me. It was, and I had to put it on the mic. Yeah, no. And Genghis Khan has a great white owl story. And the owl was on the Tartarian Empire flag. Hello,
Was an owl.
It was a griffin and one was an owl. But the Genghis Khan, he was somewhere and a white owl appeared and he found it so significant and it like showed him went up in this tree. And so he like listened to it. He probably had the feeling, like I got. It doesn't tell you like you need to go to the tree. It's like this urge. And so he goes up in the tree and hid out, and a rival army came and they said he didn't find him, and that they didn't see him, and then it saved his life, and all of his soldiers started wearing owl feathers in their hair.
That's cool. I like that. And there's always been something sacred about that. Like almost, I've heard people say that it could be used like an antenna, to extend out.
But you also told me about how Theo Vaughn talked about eating owls.
Yeah, I know. Some people
don't taste that good. I was
apparently
so
not.
upset.
Everything else you ask people, what does it taste like? All this weird shit that people eat. I talked to a lot of guys that travel over in Southeastern Asia and all that. They're like, hey, I ate snake. And you're like, hey, what does that taste like? They're like chicken. You say, hey, I ate frog and all this stuff. But owl is the one thing that tastes bad. If I was an owl, I'd go around telling everyone I taste bad. I'd be like, I don't taste very good. Speaking of things that taste bad, that reminds me of Miles Johnson, the guy that we were with last time over at the UFO conference. When he and I were in Manchester or something, he was seriously panicked. He showed up. He said this sadistic group of some UFO cult out in the UK, they were stalking him and they wanted to eat him. They were all cannibals. And he was dead serious. I said, Miles, let's get serious here. I mean, who in their right mind, what in a million years makes you think someone would eat you? You look like you taste like shit, Miles. I mean, it's just really, Theo Vaughn thinks owls taste bad. I mean, my God. But anyways, this has been a great show, Julia. Lots of fun. And I know that our next show, we're gonna come back in there and we're gonna bring in some awesome guests. I mean, I don't even know if we should list them all, but we have some exciting ones coming for sure. We mentioned tonight that we're going to have Deep Prasad come back with Johanna.
Yeah,
We're
let's
going to
not
have
tell them. Yeah, let's not tell them about the others. Now I'm never gonna
no,
talk
no.
about it beforehand.
You did let
I'm,
the cat out the bag that Danion's coming on the show. We
Damn
have
I'm never doing that again. I'm never gonna amp up or like. I knew it. I don't want to jinx it.
well, you know what? I think it's fair to say that one of these days we're going to have an owl come on the show. But it's been great. It's been great talking to you all, and always amazing, Julia. I love these conversations. These are the kind of conversations that we really want to grow with all of you as we go further and have you guys engaging in there. Julia, do you want to let them know where they can find you or find
I'm
more
a
of
hidden
these shows?
secret. I'll be with the owls.
Oh my God.
Summon me and you will find me.
Yeah, I mean, that's one way. Just follow the owls. And that's happened. You know, people could just look where the owls are flying and that you'll be there. But yeah, look out for our next show. That's going to be next Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. ish Pacific Standard Time. And we look forward to seeing you all there.
Okay, have a good night, everyone. Thank you.
Have a great night.